Everybody strap in, we are in for a roller coaster of deep lore today. I'm just gonna come out swinging on this video because today we're talking about Enigma, who, as the title of this video suggests, is what I would consider the single most complicated Marvel character of all time. I have been doing comic book lore analysis like this professionally for years now, and all of my training and experience are going to be used in this video. I don't even really know how to intro it, so you know what? I'm not gonna bother with an intro. Let's just hop right into things. Let's address you, the viewers, first. If you're new to the channel, welcome. You picked quite a video to come in on, buckle up, you're in for a ride. But if you've been here for a bit, you might be questioning my claim that Enigma is the most complicated Marvel character ever, just based on the length of this video. After all, my Captain Britain video, for example, was over 40 minutes long, so there's no way that this is going to be more complicated than that. And to you, I say, it's all relative. Brian Braddock, the main Captain Britain, has appeared in 533 comics and counting. Enigma, in his true form, has appeared in 12. All of this is based on 12 comics. So now the length of this video is probably looking a little bit scarier, and I'm about to make it worse because I need to preface something else before we start. The structure of this video is going to be insane. I think at this point I've developed a pretty good reputation for structuring my videos and presenting my concepts at least decently, but in this one we're going to be dealing with other dimensional weirdness and a lot of events in parallel universes happening concurrently and just so much incredibly complex time travel, so expect things to jump around a little bit and me to go on seemingly unrelated tangents. I swear on Khonshu himself, I will loop it all back in. And so, with all of those things out of the way, now we can finally start talking about the character. We are going to begin with Mr. Sinister, a name that some of you might actually already be familiar with, except not actually, because instead of dealing with the Mr. Sinister that's popular, we're going to be dealing with a clone. Or rather, the version of Mr. Sinister that is popular is a clone, and we're going to be talking about the original. We're so short into this video, and we're already at this level of insanity. Oh god, this is going to be rough. This Mr. Sinister begins as a human scientist in the 1800s named Nathaniel Essex. Nathaniel's specialty is in genetics, and he's extremely skilled at this, with his masterpiece theory being the idea that humanity will eventually develop mutation, and not like normal real-world mutation, X-gene X-Men stuff. He starts doing all kinds of experiments to try and prove his theory, all of which are extremely unethical. However, they do work in a way. Essex's theory is proven not by his own science though, but by the appearance of apocalypse. See, Nathaniel's ideas about human mutation being possible were absolutely correct, he just got the timing wrong. Mutants had been around for a while, but had been hiding themselves, and when Apocalypse found out about this very promising human science, he decided to have a few words with him. But rather than kill him or anything like that, Apocalypse is impressed and offers to take Essex on as a sort of dignitary. Spurred on by the death of his wife, who had discovered and disapproved of his experiments, Nathaniel accepts and is transformed into Mr. Sinister. This version of Sinister looks a lot more familiar and does end up fighting some X-Men who are time traveling back to the 19th century, but he is still not the most popular one that appears in the most comics. This version of Sinister does not live long enough to see the modern day. See, this iteration of Sinister's powers were very unstable, a chaotic combination of celestial technology given to him by Apocalypse and a lot of meddling with his own genetics. They were slowly killing him, but before his death, he had a vision of dominion. Alright, I promised you tangents, and this is going to be the first one, because we need to explain what a dominion is. This is a very specific term when we're talking about Marvel, and it revolves around artificial intelligence. But like, cool artificial intelligence, not tech bros thinking that they're suddenly artists now. This is like real sci-fi stuff. A dominion is essentially a perfected artificial mind. If you've heard of the concept of the singularity, that's kind of similar to what we're talking about here, but I'll explain it quickly for anybody who hasn't. To put it simply, a dominion is what you get when a single AI gains enough processing power to become God. They're not invulnerable, not necessarily, but pretty damn close. A normal dominion can really only be opposed by something like Galactus or the Phoenix, inherent cosmic forces of the universe that are on that magical sort of level. These things aren't typically throwing hands with any sort of cosmic entities though, because they don't really need to. Dominions inherently exist outside of time and space, which makes them both incredibly dangerous, but also means that they don't typically get involved in things. The dangerous part of their existence comes from the fact that dominions are completely separate from linear time. After all, they exist outside the space-time continuum, which means that if a dominion will ever exist, it has always existed, which is weird to wrap your head around, but just think about it a few times and hopefully you can get the gist of it. However, their dangerous state of existence also means that they aren't really a threat because most dominions will never enter space-time. Condensing their existence into the space-time continuum can be harmful to them, and so they're kind of just content to stay outside reality, which means they aren't bothering anyone in reality. So ultimately, who cares if they're out there? It doesn't matter. There are many dominions that will exist, /do exist, /have existed, but like I said in the last clip, most of them don't really matter because they're just chilling outside of reality. And aside from these baseline characteristics, there aren't a lot of similarities between them. The reason for this is that there is not a singular way to become a dominion. In fact, the word itself is just a classifying term that means something which has artificially amassed enough processing power to exit space-time, and that can be done in any way. This is a very important little fact that's going to be referenced in a minute, so remember that I said that. The question now becomes, why do dominions matter? After all, they are incredibly powerful, but ultimately irrelevant to most forms of life. However, for some people, the power is all that matters, and this was the case for Nathaniel Essex. Before his death, Essex realized that dominionhood was the pinnacle that he could ascend himself to, and became obsessed with reaching that goal. To this end, he created 4 clones. The first would continue calling himself Mr. Sinister, the second, Dr. Stasis, the third, Orbis Stellaris, and the fourth, Mother Righteous, this last one technically being a clone of Sinister's deceased wife. Each of these new beings was set on a different path to dominionhood, basically Essex tweaking variables in his experiment and running 4 iterations of it at once. Importantly though, none of them knew about the others. They all believed themselves to not only be the singular clone, but also a continuation of the original. None of them knew that they were clones at all. Once again, this will loop back in later. The next chunk of this video is going to be a brief summary of each of these clones, their plans, and the eventual outcomes of said plans. We'll start with the clone represented by the diamond, Mr. Sinister. This is finally the Mr. Sinister that appears in most of the comic books. Of course, given that Mr. Sinister has appeared in so many comics, literally hundreds of them, this is not going to be a full history of the character. This Enigma thing was a relatively recent retcon adding to his quote-unquote true purpose, and so we're just going to focus on the parts extremely relevant to that. The path to ascension that Mr. Sinister was set on was mutation. After all, the X gene is an incredibly powerful thing capable of basically anything depending on how exactly it manifests, so it might be able to turn a mortal into a dominion, and he was successful in this experiment, though it took about 1,000 years. Remember, I also promised a lot of time travel in this video, and so begins that. During this era of Marvel, all mutants were immortal. Well, technically they could die, but then they could be easily resurrected through a very complicated process that Sinister was eventually able to hijack. He was able to implant these little genetic switches into the resurrection protocols, which ensured that anyone who was brought back would find themselves, for lack of a better term, sinisterized. This was a good plan at first, and it did kind of work, but it eventually backfired on him in a maybe predictable way. Sinister was originally supposed to keep these sinisterized mutants under control, but unfortunately for him, he implanted several of his enemies with the genetic and mental signatures of his own megalomaniacal narcissistic mind, and so they figured out a way outside of the control, and everything went haywire. This leads to the mutants taking over the entire world, and over the next 1,000 years, the entire galaxy, splintering into a bunch of wild, warring factions. There's a whole event about this called Sins of Sinister, which explores this speculative future, and it's actually a very fun one. I would highly recommend it, but I can't dive into it too much now for time, which will make sense in a couple of minutes. Suffice it to say, and I am going to spoil Sins of Sinister here, but I can't explain Enigma without it, at the end of this 1,000 years or so, the galaxy is full of mutants belonging to these many factions, and Sinister eventually is able to get control over them and re-establish his psychic link, unifying them all into a hive mind, which creates a dominion. So yes, this does mean that Mr. Sinister actually succeeds in his goal in the future. He amasses enough mental processing power to get to dominionhood. And like I said, since dominions exist outside time and space, if one will exist, it will have always existed. So no matter how long it took, this was unequivocally a win. And I know that's a little bit of an odd way to end the summary of this one clone, but as is quickly becoming the catchphrase of this video and kind of Enigma as a whole, we'll loop that back in later. Now let's move on to the second clone, Dr. Stasis. Dr. Stasis was represented by the suit of clubs, and his pathway to ascension was human capabilities, both technological and biological. Not mutation though, things that humanity can both endure and create, like Captain America and Spider-Man, humans who have become more than that. We don't know as much about Dr. Stasis' history as we do for Mr. Sinister, and once again, I'm going to focus on the Enigma-specific stuff, but we do know that Stasis was the first to realize that he was a clone, not that that stopped him in his work. His plan was a bit more practical than that of Mr. Sinister. Rather than try to amass processing power to Dominionhood from scratch, he wanted to basically hijack an existing Dominion, and so he created a trap for one. Over many years, Stasis converted the entire planet Mars into a sentient computer known as a world mind, basically wanting to use it as bait for a Dominion that already existed. He wanted to lure one down into space-time and then grab it. Remember, when an infinitely powerful Dominion condenses itself into reality, it does become weakened temporarily, and Stasis took advantage of that weakness, blew up the sun, and used that energy pulse to reduce the Dominion's consciousness to nothing. Basically, he turned it off, but left the processing power there, and then uploaded his mind to that processing power instead, taking over the Dominion for himself. So this means that Dr. Stasis also succeeded in Dominionhood. You might notice a pattern starting to emerge here, and hold on to that. For now, we're going to go on to the third clone. This one is Orbis Stellaris, which is very hard to say quickly because of the S sound going into another S sound. I'm just going to call him Orbis for the rest of this, and he is represented by the suit of spades. The path that Orbis was set on was space stuff, essentially. Both Mr. Sinister and Dr. Stasis had very Earth-based plans, but Orbis was an acknowledgement that there's a lot of weird stuff out in space, and that cosmic power might be an excellent path to Dominionhood. Orbis left Earth almost immediately after his creation, and during his years of planning, amassed a gigantic alien army which would later assault the planet very successfully, killing almost every resident, including all the superhumans. Then, with all of his opposition off the table, Orbis took his sweet time grabbing up cosmic material for his eventual end goal, and was able to achieve it with a device using the pseudo-magic metal known as Mysterium and fragments of the interuniversal Macron crystal. This cosmic warp allowed him to gain enough processing power to become a Dominion, which means we are 3 for 3 right now. Only one clone left to go, and this one is my favorite. Mother Righteous, the only of the clones that is not based on Nathaniel Essex, instead being of his late wife Rebecca. Why is Mother Righteous my favorite? Well, it's because her path to ascension was magic, and anything that blends magic with superhero stuff is my favorite genre of all time. That's why she's my favorite. No other reason. Unrelated, has anyone cosplayed Mother Righteous? I think that'd be cool, you know, for research purposes. Jokes aside, well, half jokes aside, Mother Righteous is a very cool character from a story perspective. If you like weird, trippy, narrative-based magic characters, you will love her whole vibe, and her path to ascension took her to the White-Hot Room. Through a very complicated sequence of magical tricks and events, she ended up in this dimension, which is the home of the Phoenix Force, and entered battle with the cosmic embodiment of life itself, wounding it enough that she was able to make some magical effects on the world from within this realm, turning herself into a Dominion. Like seriously, she writes the story of her ascension in blood on the fabric of reality itself. Mother Righteous is badass, and she is also successful. All 4 clones become Dominions. But actually, because of this, none of them do. This is where the complexity is gonna triple down. Well, quadruple down, I guess. That's what I should have said. I'll just leave this whole clip in, whatever. See, there's one more character that we have to talk about before we can finally reach Enigma itself. One that will raise a lot of other questions, but at the very least answer some questions about the storylines that we've already seen play out. This is Moira McTaggart. Moira is actually a very long-time X-Men character, first debuting in 1975, but then she was just a human scientist. It was only a few years ago that they decided to retcon her entirely in one of the biggest retcons that I have ever seen Marvel, or really any comic book, pull off. See, they decided to establish that Moira was a mutant, and always had been a mutant, but she has one of the weirdest powers that I have ever seen. Cool, but undeniably weird and difficult to explain, so I'm gonna do it with an analogy. The best way that I can describe Moira McTaggart is that she's like a video game protagonist. In her normal day-to-day life, Moira has no superhuman abilities. She really is, for all intents and purposes, just a regular human. But if Moira dies for any reason, the entire universe around her resets to the moment of her birth, and she keeps all of her memories. This allows her to change the course of history, only within the bounds of her own lifespan, of course, but that's still incredibly powerful. Just like in a video game, if something kills you, you can use that run to gain new information and learn new patterns, and then try things out that might lead to a different outcome. That's Moira's whole thing, but that's actually not super relevant to this video, weirdly enough. The many life cycles of Moira are a fascinating story all on their own, but they would take a while to explain, and that's not what's relevant for our topic. All we really care about are her powers, because that's all that Mr. Sinister cared about. See, even before this whole Enigma retcon, Mr. Sinister's particular brand of villainy revolved around his genetics knowledge. He was able to exploit the powers of other mutants, assimilating them into himself or otherwise copying them to further his own ends. Mr. Sinister's arguably greatest work in this area was a device known as the Moira engine. This is absolutely insane. It may be one of the wildest things Marvel Comics has ever done, but basically, Mr. Sinister created a device that would constantly grow clones of Moira McTaggart. These clones would then be kept alive in stasis, and whenever Mr. Sinister wanted, he could kill a clone, reverting the timeline to the moment of that clone's birth and bringing all the information from that possible future back to that point in time. He created a respawn point for himself. This is the explanation for all the weird inconsistencies in those little clone bios that I just gave you. This is how all of their timelines span thousands of years into the future. The specific circumstances that led to their ascension wasn't something that they all got first try. They were using the Moira engine to just try this plan over and over and over and over and over until they finally found one that worked. So we have 4 successful Dominions, all of them in different Moira timelines, but remember, as I've said a few times, when a Dominion is made, it exists outside of space and time. So as long as one of the timelines was successful, it would therefore always be successful and always have been successful. That means 4 Dominions. 4 Dominions meant that they all technically failed, because there was a 5th one. All of this complexity was by design. All of these different clones and different pathways and different plots come down to Mr. Sinister being a narcissist. There was no way that he was going to allow anyone, even clones of himself, to attain the same level of power that he did. So in each of his clones, he implemented a failsafe that would channel their powers into the original. See, during the clone bio section, I said that each one of them became a Dominion. Technically, that wasn't true. I left off those stories right before the final shot. In the final shots of all of their ascension, something blocks them. This is Enigma. 4 clones, 4 different areas of power, all plugged into one prime AI that now contains the processing power of 4 different pathways to ascension. A super Dominion that controls mutation, human factors, cosmic powers, and magic all at once, all under the brain of Mr. fucking Sinister. Enigma was also represented by its own card suit like the other clones, with it being the suit of crowns. This is a real thing actually. There have occasionally been 5 suit decks of cards in the real world in which crown is the 5th one. Now, it should be noted that Enigma was not the original Nathaniel Essex, or at least not the exact same being. It did not have the same consciousness, it was merely an AI replica of that consciousness that was created in the future. How on earth is this possible? Well, it comes back to that thing that I've been looping back into several times. Dominions exist outside of time. If one exists, then it always exists. This meant that Enigma, in such weird temporal nonsense that it's very difficult to understand, was able to orchestrate events that lead to its own creation. It existed because of itself. For sci-fi nerds out there, it's Roko's Basilisk. If you haven't heard about that, don't worry about it. It's some speculative fiction stuff. But yeah, this is Marvel Comics' Roko's Basilisk. So we're not done yet, but at this point, hopefully you're starting to understand why I call Enigma the single most complicated Marvel character of all time. To understand it, you have to understand like 6 other characters, all of whom have their own role to play in the story. And remember, these are summaries. All of the clones and original Essex and Moira have their own storylines as well. I am stripping this down to the bare minimum of Enigma stuff, but there's a lot more that I could cover. So at this point in the timeline, Enigma exists and can mess with reality. Technically, since it's outside of time, it has always existed, but it can't risk getting involved in reality up until this point, because it might accidentally cause a sort of grandfather paradox. If an all-powerful Dominion starts messing with reality before the point at which it's created, it might prevent its own creation. Now that those events have come to pass, Enigma is free to do whatever it wants going forward. Now let's take a quick aside and talk about just how potentially powerful Enigma is. We will keep this brief. As I recently mentioned in my 2-hour cosmology video, Enigma was such a large potential threat that the Beyonders, extra-dimensional guardians of the multiverse, thought that the best way to prevent his possible rise was just to turn the universe off entirely. This is a retcon, but as of Enigma's writing, this is now the canon reason for the 2015 Secret Wars event. This is why the Beyonders were trying to destroy the multiverse. They saw the moment at which Enigma was going to be created and decided that in a desperate attempt to make that not happen, they had to just delete everything and restart from scratch. So it's not really a question of what Enigma can do, it's a question of what he can't. And the answer is nothing. So this begs another question. What now? Is everyone just screwed? I mean, at this point, a hyperdimensional quadruple egregore entity exists, and it can do whatever it wants. So how do we stop it? What can stop this thing? The answer is itself, and the Phoenix Force, but also itself. Remember, Dominions do have weaknesses. Not many, and the few of them are on the cosmic scale, but they do exist, and the Phoenix Force is one of them. This primordial force of life can undo the power that makes Dominions work under very certain circumstances. So naturally, Enigma wanted to take the Phoenix Force off the table first. But it didn't exactly want to try this alone because that would still be a risk, and so what it did was call out to the other Dominions. This is calling back to way earlier in the video, but other Dominions do exist. They just don't really bother reality because they're fine existing outside of space-time. Enigma tried to lure them in by saying, hey, this Phoenix Force is one of the few things that can kill us, why don't you come and join me and we can all take it out together, then we'll just have one less threat to deal with in perpetuity. Thus, Enigma was confident. He challenged the Phoenix Force, assured that he was going to have an army of similarly powerful beings at his back, and the other Dominions told him no. They told him no because Enigma was based on Mr. Sinister, and Mr. Sinister is incredibly flawed. After all, everything in Enigma's being is just self-consuming narcissism. Mr. Sinister loves himself. He wants to be the most powerful being, so he creates clones of himself to achieve that goal, but then doesn't trust those clones either, so his grand plan is to just reabsorb clones of himself, fueling his own narcissism even more. Enigma is not a stable thing to be around, and the Dominions don't want anything to do with him. Thus, at the end of his master plan, Enigma has by all accounts won. He has total mastery over everything that he wanted in the world, but in true supervillain fashion, the final thing that he cannot manage to conquer is understanding of himself and his own flaws. And that is a weakness that the Phoenix Force can exploit. In an incredibly cool shot, the Phoenix channels the life force of every mutant ever, like seriously, every mutant in the Marvel Universe is somewhere in this page if you look, and uses their collective life force to finish Enigma off. Now, it can't kill Enigma because Enigma exists, and because of the whole time thing that I've said a million times, if Enigma exists, it will always exist. But there's a loophole there that can also be exploited. The Phoenix cannot kill the Enigma, but it can trap him, freezing him in time at the moment of his quote-unquote death in eternal agony, meaning that Enigma will always exist, but only has a very small window in which that actually matters. Anything before Enigma's creation in the timeline, Enigma cannot mess with because of the whole grandfather paradox thing that I said earlier. If it messes with reality, it might prevent its own creation. But anything after its battle with the Phoenix, it is frozen in. It cannot act from that point in the timeline forward. So the only point at which Enigma can enter reality is between its creation and its battle with the Phoenix. Its influence is locked to this tiny section of time, and that neutralizes it. So Enigma isn't gone, and it will never be gone. Technically, the original Nathaniel Essex got everything he wanted, but then the proverbial monkey's paw curled. He is an all-powerful being that can't do shit with it. Even though Enigma's relevance has been cosmically reduced, its influence is still felt. After all, the ascensions of the Sinister clones did happen in alternate timelines, and some of them, Mr. Sinister and Orbis Stellaris specifically, are still alive in the main timeline and doing villain things, presumably. Dr. Stasis and Mother Righteous, on the other hand, did both die in the main timeline, but Mother Righteous is gonna come back. I don't really have any evidence to that, I'm just saying it for my own purposes, please. And with that, the story of Enigma comes to a close. And now that I'm done, I want to remind everybody of something I said at the beginning. Remember, Enigma in his final combined form only appears in 12 issues. This isn't decades of history, guys, and this was only a summary. It's just rapid fire complexity if you're actually reading the comic. I do think the title of most complex Marvel character is well earned. Oh, also, while I'm here, this is a good opportunity to plug something else. If you liked the storyline of Enigma and want to hear some more about the creative process behind it, as well as a lot of other things, a couple months ago, I got to do an interview with Kieran Gillen, the creator of Enigma and writer of a lot of these comics. You can find that on this channel. I did it before the whole TikTok ban debacle, so before I started posting this type of content, but scroll back a little bit and you can find it. It's called Stories and Superpowers, and if I can toot my own horn for a second, I think I'm pretty proud of it. Kieran is one of my favorite writers, and it was an honor to get to talk to him. And as usual, thank you so much to all of you for watching what turned out to be it hasn't been edited yet, in like the 25 to 30 minute range? I really was hoping to do like a 15 to 20 minute one after the 2-hour cosmology video, but I like doing this, so if I'm gonna talk for 30 minutes, I'm gonna talk for 30 minutes. Big shout out to Ruben Perez for drawing the art of the character that you've been watching talk at you for the last 30 minutes or so. And actually, if you like this character, stay tuned for some more announcements that should be coming in the next couple months. I got a lot of projects in the works, both some big YouTube videos and some other new things. Much like Mr. Sinister, I always have plans of my own, and hopefully mine will be at least 30% less evil.